The galaxy was full of stars, but not every star shined with peace. Among the countless worlds, many were ruled by fear. One of the greatest empires in that dark time was called the Kavar Dominion. They were powerful, ruthless, and they spread like a storm. Whenever their fleets entered a system, it was only a matter of time before entire civilizations were crushed. The Kavar did not conquer with mercy. They took what they wanted. They enslaved those who resisted. And they left behind only silence. For the smaller civilizations, there was no escape. They had no fleets strong enough, no armies to fight back, and no leaders who could protect them. Many of these races had lived in peace for centuries, developing their cultures, their art, their science. But peace could not defend them when the Dominion came. Soon, one after another, their worlds fell. Great cities turned to ruins, and proud people were forced into chains. And yet, even in the darkest times, hope has a way of surviving. Across the galaxy, whispers began to spread among the oppressed. Some said there might be others far away who could hear their cries. The enslaved and the desperate began to send out messages into the void. These were not military signals or diplomatic messages. They were simple, raw pleas, voices filled with sorrow, desperation, and fear. Entire communities gathered in secret just to record one word: help. Others sent long broadcasts describing the horrors they lived through, begging anyone, anywhere to listen. No one expected much. Most believed the signals would vanish into the endless void of space. But still, they sent them, because doing nothing meant giving up completely. These transmissions traveled farther than anyone guessed. They crossed regions of dead stars, clouds of dust, and great stretches of silence. And in time, they reached a small blue world on the edge of the galaxy. That world was Earth. When the signals first arrived, they caused confusion. Scientists who studied the stars picked them up by accident. At first, they thought the messages were only static or broken signals from deep space. But slowly, the truth became clear. They were voices, alien voices. They spoke in words no human had ever heard before, but the emotions in them were easy to understand: pain, fear, pleading. Those voices carried the same desperation any human could recognize, because humanity had once known that same pain on their own world. News spread quickly. Soon, governments, research groups, and even ordinary people were aware that somewhere out there, intelligent beings were begging for help. Some people doubted it. They said it was impossible, just tricks of radio waves or mistakes in machines. Others warned that it could be dangerous, that maybe these messages were traps, meant to lure humans into something they were not ready for. But no matter how many doubted, there were those who listened with open hearts. Around the world, groups began to translate the messages. Advanced computers tried to break down the patterns of speech. Slowly, words and meanings became clear. The aliens were real, and their suffering was real. They told of the Dominion's cruelty, of families broken apart, of whole cities destroyed in a day. They told of begging their conquerors for mercy and being met only with laughter. And above all, they asked a question: is there anyone who will come? On Earth, leaders met to discuss what should be done. Some argued that humanity should stay silent. Earth itself was still young in space exploration. Humans had only just begun to travel to nearby stars. To challenge a galactic empire sounded foolish. Others argued that Earth had a duty to remain cautious. Why risk billions of lives for strangers so far away? But then came the voices of those who remembered history. Humanity had known conquest too. They had known slavery, cruelty, and oppression. They had known what it felt like to cry out for mercy and to be ignored. And humanity had also known what it felt like to stand up, to fight back, and to earn freedom through struggle. This memory stirred something deep. Earth had scars, but those scars carried lessons. And many believed that ignoring the pleas of the oppressed would be the same as betraying their own ancestors who had once cried for help. Slowly, the decision formed, not in secret, but in the hearts of people everywhere. Humanity would answer. The first step was preparation. Earth did not have fleets as vast as the Dominions. Its technology was still catching up. But humans had something else: creativity, stubbornness, and a will to fight for what they believed in. Engineers began to design ships not for conquest but for survival. Old vessels were refitted, new ones built. Soldiers were trained not only in war, but also in how to bring aid. Doctors and medics volunteered, ready to heal the wounded of worlds they had never seen. Even farmers and builders stepped forward, knowing that once the fighting stopped, there would be homes and lives to rebuild. It was not just governments that prepared. Ordinary people gave what they could. Some donated money, others gave time and skills. Whole communities built supplies, food, medicine, tools, and loaded them onto the ships. Humanity was not sending conquerors. They were sending protectors. They were sending themselves. Meanwhile, the voices from the stars continued. They did not know their messages had been heard. They kept crying out, begging into the void, thinking no one would answer. But somewhere far away, on a little blue world, a fleet was being readied. Humanity was about to step into a story much greater than themselves. In the final days before departure, the mood on Earth was heavy yet hopeful. Families said goodbye to those who would not return for years, maybe never. The skies above Earth filled with ships preparing to leave. For many, it felt like a step into the unknown. But when the first fleet finally lifted off, the world watched together. People held their breath, knowing this moment would be remembered forever. The oppressed races of the galaxy had begged for mercy, and soon they would discover that their cries had not been in vain. Someone had heard them, and though they did not yet know it, the ones who would answer were humans, creatures who had been called many things in their own history. Survivors, fighters, builders, dreamers. Some had even called them monsters. But now these so-called monsters were on their way, carrying not only weapons but also mercy, and that journey was only just beginning. When the voices from the stars reached Earth, they were no longer just strange signals. They had become real stories, with real suffering. By the time humanity finally understood the full meaning of the transmissions, something inside them had already changed. The question was no longer whether the messages were true, but what should be done about them. Meetings were held across the world. Leaders argued, scientists warned of risks, and military officials listed everything that humanity lacked compared to a galactic empire. Earth had only a handful of ships able to travel between stars. They were nothing compared to the mighty armadas of the Dominion. If humanity sent a fleet, it would be small. If humanity fought, it would be outnumbered. If humanity lost, they might draw the Dominion's wrath down upon their own world. Many believed the cost was too high. And yet, against all the warnings, there were voices that refused to stay silent. These voices did not come only from generals or presidents. They came from ordinary people who had read the translated messages, who had seen the pain of strangers across the galaxy. These people said, "If no one helps them, then what does that make us? If we stay safe while others are crushed, then who are we really?" Slowly, a decision grew, like a fire spreading from one corner of the Earth to another. Humanity would not ignore the cries for help. They would answer, not with promises of conquest, not with dreams of glory, but with a single idea: that no one who begged for mercy should be left unheard. The preparations were unlike anything Earth had done before. Shipyards were expanded. Old satellites and stations orbiting Earth were turned into places to build new craft. Every nation, no matter how small, gave something. Some gave technology, others resources, others skilled people. Rivalries that had lasted for decades were put aside because something greater was at stake. It was the first time in history that the people of Earth worked not just for themselves, but for beings far beyond their world. The ships themselves were not elegant. Compared to the sleek designs of galactic empires, human ships looked rough and heavy. But they were strong. Every part of them was built with a human mindset. Make it survive, no matter what. Weapons were added, but so were medical bays. Cargo. Holds were filled not only with ammunition, but also with food, water, medicines, and tools for rebuilding. Humanity was not coming only to fight. They were coming to heal, to shelter, and to give hope. Training began as soon as the first ships were ready. Soldiers practiced fighting in environments they had never seen before: low gravity, alien atmospheres, strange climates. Engineers studied how to repair ships with limited materials because they knew resources would be scarce in faraway battles. Doctors studied alien biology, learning as much as they could from the fragments of information hidden inside the transmissions. Farmers even trained, preparing to grow food in soil that might not be Earth-like at all. It was as if the whole planet was preparing, not just an army. Families felt the weight of this choice most of all. Parents hugged children who might not see them again. Friends said goodbyes filled with both fear and pride. Across the world there was sorrow, but also a sense of honor. People knew that those leaving might never return. But they were proud that humanity had chosen not to hide. Finally, the day came when the first fleet was ready. It was not vast, but it was determined. Ships rose from Earth, their engines blazing against the darkness. People stood in cities, on mountains, near oceans, watching the skies as bright trails cut across the atmosphere. Every launch was broadcast live, and billions watched together. Some cheered, some cried, some prayed. Everyone knew history was being written in that moment. As the fleet left Earth's orbit, the mood aboard the ships was tense but hopeful. Men and women from every corner of Earth now stood side by side. They spoke different languages, carried different traditions, but all shared the same mission. Many of them whispered the same thought: "We are not the strongest, we are not the most advanced, but we are going." Out in the galaxy, the oppressed races still sent their desperate signals. They still believed that no one had heard. But soon, they would see something no one expected. Against the endless darkness, human ships would appear, ships carrying the flag of Earth, a world unknown to them, a world they had never asked for, yet a world that had chosen to answer their plea. The first encounters were quiet. Human scouts found devastated planets, burned cities, and broken satellites. In the ruins, survivors hid, too afraid to believe that rescue had come. But when human voices finally spoke to them, translated through machines, many wept. They could not believe it was real. They asked again and again, "Why are you here? Why would you come for us?" And the humans answered simply, "Because you asked, because you begged for mercy, and we could not stay silent." Word spread quickly. In secret networks, whispers of hope traveled. People who had given up now dared to believe again. They told each other of strange new allies, beings who looked different, who spoke strangely, but who fought for them. They told of humans who were not afraid to face the Dominion, even though they were outnumbered. When the Dominion first heard of this, they laughed. To them, humans were nothing, a backwater species, weak and untested. They expected the humans to fall quickly, but the Dominion had misjudged something important. They did not understand what kind of people had come from Earth. The humans who had left their world were not explorers seeking wealth nor conquerors seeking power. They were ordinary men and women, hardened by their own long history of struggle. They were builders, soldiers, doctors, dreamers, united not by force, but by choice. And that choice made them dangerous. They did not come because they had to. They came because they wanted to. In the first small battles, the Dominion began to realize this. Human ships did not retreat when outnumbered. They fought to the last, sometimes ramming enemy vessels when weapons ran dry. Their tactics were strange, reckless by Dominion standards, but they worked. Humans thought differently, and that difference gave them an edge. What the Dominion saw as madness, the oppressed saw as bravery. Every world the humans reached, they did more than fight. They gave food to the starving. They built shelters for the homeless. They tended to the sick, even when alien biology confused them. Children who had known only fear suddenly had people who smiled at them, protected them, and treated them kindly. For many, it was the first time they had ever felt safe. The humans themselves were changed by this too. They looked into the eyes of beings who were nothing like them and yet saw the same pain they once knew in their own history. That connection grew stronger with every rescue, every battle, every rebuilding. It reminded them why they had left their home in the first place. And so, step by step, the humans pushed forward. Their fleet grew as some freed species joined them, adding ships and fighters to the cause. The Dominion, once so confident, now grew uneasy. Who were these strangers? Where had they come from? Why did they fight so fiercely for people who were not even their own? The answer was simple, though the Dominion could never understand it. The humans had heard the cries for mercy, and they had chosen to answer. When the humans first met the fleets of the Dominion in open battle, the galaxy held its breath. Many believed that Earth's small force would be destroyed in moments. The Dominion had spent centuries crushing rivals with overwhelming numbers and advanced technology. To them, humanity was just another weak species, late to the stars and foolish enough to stand in the way of an empire. The commanders of the Dominion expected a short fight, one that would end with wreckage scattered across space. But what followed shocked everyone who saw it. Humans did not fight the way the Dominion expected. Their ships were fewer and their weapons less advanced, yet their tactics were unpredictable. When outnumbered, they did not retreat. When damaged, they did not surrender. Instead, they adapted, in ways that seemed reckless to the Dominion but made perfect sense to human minds. If shields failed, they used speed. If weapons broke, they used creativity. And when all else failed, they rammed their ships into enemy vessels, choosing destruction over defeat. The first reports that returned to the Dominion High Council described humans as something beyond comprehension. Commanders called them irrational, wild, and terrifying. Soldiers who had faced them said it was like fighting creatures that refused to accept reality. Even when trapped, humans would laugh, taunt their enemies, and keep fighting as though victory were still possible. For the Dominion, who relied on fear and submission to control their enemies, this was something entirely new. They did not know how to crush those who refused to be crushed. To the oppressed races watching from the shadows, the humans seemed almost supernatural. Entire communities gathered secretly around broken receivers to hear the first stories of human victories. They heard of small fleets defeating much larger ones, of soldiers fighting until the last breath, of ships that burned but still pressed forward. They heard of humans who faced death without hesitation, who acted not like prey but like predators. To them, the humans became a legend in the making. The word monsters began to spread among Dominion forces, whispered in fear. It was not the kind of monster from children's stories, but the kind that haunted soldiers in their dreams. To face humans meant facing an enemy that did not break. Dominion propaganda tried to twist this image, calling humans brutal and savage, unworthy of respect. But the very words meant to scare others only gave hope to the oppressed. They said to themselves, "If these monsters fight for us, then perhaps we can be free." On the battlefield, human behavior reinforced this belief. Their strategies confused the Dominion, because humans fought not only with weapons but also with imagination. They turned asteroids into shields, used stars' gravity to slingshot their ships, and turned wreckage into traps. Every battle was different, every tactic new. Dominion commanders who relied on strict rules and traditions could not predict them. Each time they thought they had learned how to defeat the humans, they were proven wrong. But it was not only their fighting that made humans feared. It was the way they endured pain. Stories spread of human soldiers who kept fighting even after wounds that should have ended them. Medics rushed to patch them up, but many refused to stop until the mission was complete. Dominion troops, used to enemies begging for mercy, could not understand this. They wondered what kind of beings would risk everything for people who were not even their own species. One of the most famous battles during these early days took place near a mining colony that had been enslaved by the Dominion. A small human fleet of only 7 ships faced nearly 20 Dominion warships. The enslaved miners, hiding in underground shelters, expected the humans to be destroyed. Instead, they watched as the battle unfolded like nothing they had ever seen. The humans fought with every trick they had. They feigned retreat only to lure the Dominion into a trap. They used damaged ships as decoys, drawing fire while the others attacked from unexpected angles. The final moment of that battle became legend. When the largest Dominion warship turned its guns on the colony itself, a human captain made a decision. With his ship badly damaged and weapons gone, he steered directly into the enemy's vessel. His crew evacuated in escape pods, but he remained on board, guiding the burning craft into the enemy. The impact tore through the Dominion flagship, splitting it apart. The enslaved miners who saw it with their own eyes told the story again and again. A single human ship, destroyed in fire, had saved an entire colony. From that day, they called humans not only monsters, but also protectors. The Dominion began to realize that they faced something different from any opponent before. They had fought strong enemies, clever enemies, even stubborn ones. But never had they fought enemies who combined all those traits with an unshakable will. To the Dominion, humans were dangerous not because of their technology, but because of their spirit. They were impossible to break. For the oppressed, the human way of fighting carried another message. It showed that courage could stand against fear. It showed that mercy did not mean weakness and that kindness could live side by side with ferocity. When survivors were rescued, they were often shocked to find that the same soldiers who had fought like demons in battle would later kneel beside them, offering food, water, and comfort. They could not understand how the same hands that wielded weapons with such fury could also carry children so gently. This balance confused many, but it also inspired them. Whole communities began to resist in small ways, encouraged by the knowledge that someone out there was fighting for them. Secret rebellions started in Dominion-controlled worlds. They sabotaged weapons, refused orders, and passed along information to the humans. For the first time in generations, the people under Dominion rule had hope. Meanwhile, the Dominion High Command grew increasingly frustrated. They tried to study the humans to understand their weakness. They looked for patterns but found none. They tried to spread fear, but fear only seemed to fuel human resolve. They even attempted to bribe and threaten captured humans, but their prisoners only laughed or spat back defiance. Dominion leaders began to whisper to each other that perhaps these humans truly were monsters, monsters who thrived on chaos, monsters who could not be controlled. The humans themselves did not see it that way. To them, they were simply doing what had to be done. They remembered their own past, their own long struggles on Earth, and they carried those lessons with them. They had once fought wars that seemed endless, endured suffering that seemed unbearable, and rebuilt from ruins more than once. That history had shaped them into people who could endure, adapt, and survive. Now it made them into warriors the galaxy had never seen before. As more battles were fought, the legend of the humans spread farther. They were spoken of in whispers in the darkest prisons of the Dominion. They were described with awe in the songs of freed refugees. Children drew pictures of them, calling them the monsters who saved the helpless. The name, Deathworlders, began to rise among those who learned that Earth itself was a harsh planet, shaping people tough enough to survive anything. To the Dominion, this name was meant as an insult, but to the oppressed it became a title of respect. These monsters from Earth were not like the monsters of the Dominion. They did not come to take. They came to fight. They came to protect. And in their shadow, the galaxy began to change. The Dominion had always believed fear was stronger than hope, but in the battles against humans, that belief began to crack. The more the Dominion tried to scare humanity, the more humans resisted. The more they tried to break their spirit, the stronger they seemed to grow. And behind the humans came something even more dangerous: hope spreading among the oppressed worlds. The Dominion still had greater numbers. Their fleets still filled the stars. But they now faced an enemy who did not fight only with weapons. They faced an enemy who fought with history, with determination, and with the unshakable belief that mercy must be answered. And in the eyes of the galaxy, those humans became both monsters and saviors at the same time. The humans had begun to change the galaxy in ways the Dominion could not stop. Yet, even as they fought battles and defeated fleets, what truly set them apart was not only how they fought, but what they did afterward. They did not conquer worlds or take control of the populations they freed. Instead, they offered aid, shelter, and hope. Every planet they visited became a place where survival was possible, where people who had only known fear could begin to dream again. It started with the smallest things. Human engineers repaired water systems that had been destroyed. Farmers taught local populations how to grow crops in damaged soil. Medics treated injuries that alien doctors had struggled to handle for years. In many ways, humanity moved like a wave of care across war-torn worlds, touching lives that had almost forgotten what safety meant. Children, who had known nothing but war and starvation, began to laugh again. Adults who had given up began to rebuild homes and businesses. Communities that had been hidden away in fear started to come out into the open, proud that someone had come to help them. Even as the humans healed, they remained relentless fighters. Their soldiers, though gentle with the rescued, were fierce on the battlefield. Alien commanders who witnessed this could not understand it. How could beings who were so merciless in war also show such compassion to the weak? For many, it was impossible to reconcile. But for humanity, it made sense. They had learned through their own history that survival and compassion were not opposites. They were connected. You fought to survive, but when survival was possible, you gave mercy, because that was the only way to preserve hope. One of the most remarkable examples occurred on a planet that had been mined to death by the Dominion. The surface was scarred, the skies dark with dust, and most of the population had fled underground. Humans arrived not only with weapons but with machines to clean the soil, systems to purify water, and medical teams who worked tirelessly for days without rest. They built temporary homes, taught locals how to use new tools, and even set up schools for children who had been forced to work instead of learn. By the time the Dominion returned with a small fleet, they found the humans already gone. But the people they saved were prepared, fed, and armed with hope as well as simple defenses. Stories like this spread quickly. Survivors began to tell each other about the strange humans who came not to dominate, but to protect. Even those who had been hiding for years came forward to offer help or join the resistance. The humans encouraged this, giving them leadership, training, teaching them strategies, and sharing knowledge of the Dominion's weaknesses. It was a methodical process. Humans did not only fight battles themselves, they empowered others to fight alongside them, creating strength that grew faster than the Dominion could destroy it. In some ways, their mercy was as terrifying as their war. The Dominion had never seen an enemy who was equally capable of giving and taking. Soldiers whispered among themselves about humans who could destroy entire fleets one day, then save thousands of civilians the next. They fought with a kind of precision that seemed cold at first glance, but there was purpose behind it. The humans did not enjoy destruction. They used it only to protect life. This distinction was lost on the Dominion, but it became legendary among the liberated populations. The humans also demonstrated mercy in smaller, quiet ways that made a deep impact. A soldier might carry a wounded alien child across a battlefield, ignoring his own safety. A medic might stay with a trapped family for hours, using every skill to free them. Even the simplest acts, like sharing food or comforting someone in fear, created bonds of trust and loyalty that spread faster than any weapon. These acts reminded the oppressed that not all beings in the galaxy were cruel, and that life was worth fighting for. Mercy became a tool as powerful as any weapon. People who had been enslaved or oppressed began to rise up in secret, inspired by the humans' courage and care. They sabotaged Dominion operations, passed secret messages, and even fought alongside the humans in daring raids. Slowly, the galaxy's balance began to shift. The Dominion could no longer rely solely on fear to maintain control. Hope, nurtured by human mercy, became a force that could not be crushed. The humans themselves understood the risks. They knew that showing mercy in a galaxy accustomed to cruelty made them vulnerable. They often traveled in small groups, sometimes isolated, and they faced ambushes because of their compassion. But humanity's leaders believed it was worth the risk. They saw mercy as a strength, not a weakness. Every life they saved was a spark that could ignite resistance. Every healed community became another ally. And in the long fight against the Dominion, that spark would grow into an unstoppable fire. As time passed, humans became more than just fighters or medics. They became symbols. Wherever they went, their presence alone changed the hearts of the oppressed. People who had given up learned to hope. Children who had only known fear began to dream. Even soldiers who had been captured by the Dominion found themselves questioning what they fought for when they saw the humans. Some defected, joining the resistance after witnessing humanity's actions firsthand. In many ways, the humans taught the galaxy a lesson it had forgotten. Strength is not measured only by weapons or numbers. True strength lies in endurance, courage, and the willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The humans' combination of ferocity in battle and care in peace became legendary, and the term monsters of Earth took on a new meaning. It was not a name of fear for the oppressed, but of respect. To see a human arrive meant salvation, not destruction. And yet, humanity never forgot the stakes. Every planet they freed, every fleet they defeated, reminded them that the Dominion was still out there. The war was far from over, and every act of mercy carried risks. But humans continued forward, undeterred because they believed that the galaxy could be better if they acted. They knew that mercy was not weakness. It was a choice that required courage equal to any battle. Even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, humans left hope behind. Entire civilizations that had been abandoned found themselves protected, fed, and taught to defend themselves. Children who had never seen kindness learned to smile. Families torn apart by cruelty were reunited, and as they rebuilt, they told stories of the humans who had fought for them, showing them that even in a universe of monsters, there could be mercy. The Dominion began to fear not just the humans' strength, but their ability to inspire. Every victory, every act of mercy created allies where before there were none. Worlds that had once accepted slavery now resisted. Communities that had hidden for centuries now rose to fight. And in this growing resistance, the humans became more than soldiers. They became legends, living proof that mercy, combined with unyielding courage, could change the course of the galaxy. The final stage of the human campaign against the Dominion was not simply about battles, it was about transformation. The galaxy had seen powerful fleets and mighty empires, but it had never seen a force like humanity. The humans did not conquer for glory or wealth. They came for those who had been abandoned, those who had begged for mercy, and those who had lost hope. And in answering that call, they became something new, not just warriors, but legends. The Dominion, once untouchable, began to crumble under the pressure. Their soldiers no longer moved with certainty. Their leaders could not predict what humans would do next. The oppressed, who had once been hidden, began to rise in coordinated resistance. Communication networks were rebuilt, sabotage campaigns grew, and intelligence flowed like a river to the human forces. Every victory human forces achieved empowered others to fight, creating a chain reaction the Dominion could not control. Humans became symbols of both fear and hope. To the Dominion, they were terrifying monsters. To the oppressed, they were saviors. In every system humans liberated, stories spread of courage and mercy. People told how humans had arrived, often outnumbered and outgunned, and still pressed forward. They told of soldiers who fought with unmatched bravery, medics who healed with tireless patience, and communities rebuilt under human guidance. These stories inspired more resistance, more hope, and more courage. The humans also understood the importance of leaving lasting impact. It was not enough to defeat the Dominion temporarily. Every planet liberated needed to be able to survive in the Dominion's absence. Humans trained local populations in defense strategies, shared technology, and established systems for governance and communication. Entire generations of oppressed species were educated, equipped, and empowered to maintain freedom on their own. Humanity's reach became more than physical. It became cultural, strategic, and moral. One of the most memorable campaigns involved a Dominion-controlled system with 10 million civilians trapped under strict martial law. The humans approached with a small fleet, far smaller than the Dominion's presence. They carefully coordinated with underground resistance groups, setting up supply drops, evacuation plans, and diversion tactics. Over days, weeks, and months, they freed millions without destroying the infrastructure. Children who had never seen sunlight walked among their rescuers, and elders who had lived in fear for decades finally smiled again. It was a victory measured, not in ships destroyed, but in lives saved. Even as the humans won, they never took what was not